Millionaire CEO orders steak. Black waitress slips him a note that paralyzes him. In the heart of Chicago's Gold Coast, Jonathan Rivers had eaten the same steak dinner every Tuesday for 3 years, until a trembling waitress slipped him 7 words that brought his empire to its knees. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. The marble floors of the Pinnacle gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Jonathan Rivers adjusted his Armani cuffs and surveyed his kingdom of white tablecloths and whispered conversations. At 52, he commanded Chicago's skyline through Rivers Development Corporation, but tonight, like every Tuesday for the past 3 years, he sat alone at table 7, ordering the same ribeye medium rare. "Your usual, Mr. Rivers?" The familiar maitre d' approached with practiced deference. "Always." Jonathan's voice carried the weight of boardroom authority, even here among the city's elite, dining at tables that cost more than most monthly salaries. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of Michigan Avenue glittered below like fallen stars, but Jonathan's attention remained fixed on his phone, scrolling through acquisition reports that would make tomorrow's Wall Street Journal. Tell me in the comments, do you think successful people are truly happy, or are they running from something? Across the restaurant's gleaming expanse, Amara Johnson balanced 3 plates on her left arm while pouring water with her right, her movements fluid despite the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. At 28, she moved through the Pinnacle like a ghost in black and white uniform, invisible to the patrons who saw only service, never the woman providing it. "Table 12 needs more wine," barked Chef Laurent from the kitchen's swinging doors. "And that oil executive at table 4 is complaining about his Dover sole again." Amara nodded, tucking a strand of natural hair back under her headband. Her feet ached in the required black heels, and her mind wandered to the medical bills stacked on her Southside apartment's kitchen counter. Destiny's latest round of treatments would cost another $3,000, money that existed somewhere between hope and impossibility. She'd been watching the lone man at table 7 for months now, noting his ritual precision. Always Tuesday. Always ribeye. Always that same hollow expression as he stared at his phone, surrounded by Chicago's power elite yet somehow more isolated than anyone in the room. Something about his loneliness called to her own, though she'd never dared acknowledge it until tonight. The dinner rush swirled around them like separate storms, Jonathan wielding his solitude like armor, Amara carrying her burdens with quiet dignity. Neither knew they were about to collide in ways that would reshape both their carefully constructed worlds. As Amara approached his table with the wine list, she noticed something different tonight. Beside his phone lay a small silver picture frame, face down on the white linen. In 3 years of serving him, she'd never seen him bring anything personal to these dinners. "Your ribeye will be ready shortly, Mr. Rivers," she said, her voice professionally pleasant despite the curiosity burning in her chest. He looked up then, really looked at her for the first time, and Amara saw something unexpected in his steel-gray eyes, a pain so deep it made her breath catch. It was the same expression she wore in her bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., when the medical bills, an empty refrigerator, and her daughter's brave smile became too much to bear. "Thank you," he said quietly, and for a moment the bustling restaurant faded around them. That's when Amara noticed it, the corner of a photograph peeking from beneath the frame. A child's smile, bright against what looked like a hospital bed. Her hand trembled as she reached for his empty bread plate, recognition striking like lightning. She'd seen that same desperate hope in her own daughter's medical records, witnessed the same haunted look in parents' eyes in Children's Memorial Hospital's oncology ward. Some instinct, deeper than training or social boundaries, whispered that this powerful man wasn't so different from her after all. The kitchen bell chimed, signaling his order was ready. But as Amara walked away, she felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on her shoulders. The note in her apron pocket, hastily written on order pad paper during her break, suddenly felt like the most important word she'd ever penned. Back at table 7, Jonathan stared at the overturned photograph of his daughter Emma, taken just weeks before leukemia claimed her 4 years ago. Every Tuesday, he came here because it was the restaurant where they'd celebrated her remission. 2 months before the cancer returned with devastating fury. The guilt of missing her final weeks while closing a merger in Dubai still ate at him daily. As Amara returned with his perfectly cooked steak, her hands shook slightly. She set down the plate with careful precision, then, in one heart-stopping moment of courage, slipped a folded piece of paper beneath his napkin. "Enjoy your meal, sir," she whispered, then disappeared into the crowd of servers and patrons, leaving Jonathan staring at the hidden note that would change everything. The Pinnacle continued its elegant dance of fine dining and whispered deals, but at table 7, a billionaire's hands trembled as he unfolded 7 words that would strip away every wall he'd built around his broken heart. Jonathan's fingers moved toward the folded paper with the hesitancy of a man approaching his own judgment. The Pinnacle's ambient noise, clinking silverware, muted conversations, the soft jazz from hidden speakers, seemed to fade into white static as he lifted his napkin. The note was written on order pad paper, the handwriting careful but hurried. "Your daughter would be proud of who you've become." The words hit him like a physical blow. His breathing stopped. The fork clattered from his nerveless fingers onto the bone china plate, the sound sharp enough to turn heads at neighboring tables. But Jonathan didn't notice. He was drowning. Emma. How could this waitress, this stranger, know about Emma? His throat constricted as if invisible hands were squeezing the life from him. The carefully constructed walls he'd built around his grief crumbled in an instant, leaving him exposed and bleeding in the middle of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. His vision blurred. For years of suppressed anguish came rushing back like a dam bursting. Emma's laugh echoing through their Lincoln Park mansion. Her brave smile during chemo sessions he'd missed for board meetings. Her son whispered, "I love you, Daddy," while he held her hand in that sterile hospital room, promising her adventures they'd never take. Across the dining room, Amara pretended to refill water glasses while her heart hammered against her ribs. She watched Jonathan's face transform, watched his composure shatter like glass hitting marble. His shoulders shook. His hand covered his mouth as if to hold back a sob. "What have I done?" The thought screamed through her mind. She'd crossed a line that could cost her everything. This job fed her daughter, paid for Destiny's medications, and kept their small apartment in Bronzeville. But seeing him sitting there every Tuesday, carrying that photograph, looking as lost as she felt in children's memorials waiting rooms, she couldn't stay silent anymore. 3 months ago, she'd been cleaning table 7 after his departure when she'd glimpsed the photograph that had slipped from his jacket. A beautiful little girl with his same gray eyes, wearing a Cubs cap in what was clearly a hospital bed. The image had haunted her because it mirrored her own fears about Destiny's ongoing battle with sickle cell anemia. "Miss Johnson." The voice behind her made her spine stiffen. Chef Laurent stood there, his expression thunderous. "Table 7 appears distressed. Did something happen?" Amara's mouth went dry. Through the kitchen service window, she could see Jonathan still staring at the note, his powerful frame hunched over like a man in prayer. Several patrons were glancing his way now, their whispered conversations carrying undertones of curiosity and concern. I don't know, Chef. He seemed fine when I brought his steak." Laurent's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Rivers has been coming here for years. He's never caused a scene." If this affects his experience, or our reputation, there will be consequences. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Amara nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. She'd risked everything on 7 words born from shared pain and desperate hope. Now she might lose the one thing keeping her daughter alive. Back at table 7, Jonathan's world continued to spin off its axis. He read the note again, the simple words carrying weight that seemed impossible. Your daughter would be proud of who you've become. But would she? His business empire was built on calculated acquisitions that displaced families, on development projects that pushed out the vulnerable. After Emma's death, he'd thrown himself into work with ruthless efficiency, using success as a shield against grief. He'd donated millions to children's hospitals, anonymous gifts that satisfied his accountant and his guilt in equal measure, but never engaged personally with the cause. Who you've become. The phrase echoed in his mind. Had he become anyone Emma would recognize? The father who'd missed her school plays for merger negotiations? Who'd hired nannies to take her to treatments while he conquered markets across 3 continents? His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant about tomorrow's acquisition meeting, a chain of family restaurants he planned to demolish for luxury condos. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he sat in a temple to excess, mourning his daughter while simultaneously destroying the livelihoods of families just trying to survive. The steak grew cold on his plate as memories flooded back. Emma at 6, declaring she wanted to help sick kids when she grew up. Emma at 8, donating her allowance to St. Jude's after seeing a commercial. Emma at 10, spending her final conscious days writing letters to other children in the oncology ward, telling them to be brave. She would be proud. The note's author had seen something he'd forgotten about himself, something buried beneath years of guilt and emotional numbness. But who was she? How could a stranger working in a restaurant understand his pain so intimately? Jonathan's eyes found Amara across the dining room. She was pouring wine for table 12, but her hands trembled slightly, and she kept glancing his way with an expression that mixed fear and desperate hope. At that moment he saw her, really saw her, for the first time in 3 years of Tuesday dinners. She was young, maybe late 20s, with natural beauty that shone despite her obvious exhaustion. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They held the same haunted quality he recognized from his mirror, the look of someone who'd spent too many nights in hospital waiting rooms, who'd held hope and despair in equal measure. She knows. The realization hit him like a second wave. This wasn't coincidence or presumption. This woman understood his pain because she lived with her own version of it. As if sensing his scrutiny, Amara turned. Their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, 2 souls recognizing kindred grief despite the vast social chasm between them. The moment stretched like eternity, heavy with unspoken understanding and the terrible vulnerability of being truly seen. Then Chef Laurent appeared beside her again, his voice carrying across the dining room with sharp authority. Miss Johnson, table 7 requires immediate attention. The spell broke. Amara straightened her shoulders and walked toward Jonathan's table, each step requiring courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Behind her, she felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant, the whispered speculation of Chicago's elite watching a drama unfold in their sanctuary. At table 7, Jonathan carefully folded the note and slipped it into his jacket pocket, next to his heart. When Amara reached him, he looked up with eyes red-rimmed but no longer hollow. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice broken but sincere. And in that moment, both their worlds shifted forever. Jonathan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 42nd floor office, Chicago's skyline spreading beneath him like a conquered territory. The note lay crumpled in his jacket pocket, Its 7 words burned into his memory. "Your daughter would want you to help mine." He'd read it 100 times since last night, each viewing feeling like a fresh wound. "She doesn't know anything," he muttered to the glass, his reflection staring back with hollow eyes. "Some waitress thinking she can," but the words died as he remembered the photograph tucked in the note's fold. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing the same brave smile Emma had worn during chemotherapy. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Rivers, the Patterson acquisition meeting is in 10 minutes. Cancel it." The words came out sharper than intended. "Sir, this is the $300 million. I said cancel it, Patricia." Jonathan's hand found the note again, its edges soft from his repeated handling. The waitress, Amara, according to the signature, had somehow seen through his carefully constructed facade in ways that trained psychologists and concerned board members never could. Across town in Bronzeville, Amara sat in the cramped waiting room of Children's Memorial Hospital, her uniform replaced by worn jeans and a Chicago Bulls sweatshirt. Destiny lay curled against her side, her small body exhausted from another round of treatments, her natural curls hidden beneath a bright purple headband that couldn't quite disguise the effects of chemotherapy. "Mama, why did you give that man Daddy's picture?" Destiny's voice was whisper-soft, but her dark eyes held wisdom beyond her 8 years. Amara's throat tightened. The photograph she'd slipped into that note was one of only 3 she had of Destiny's father, Marcus, who died in Afghanistan when Destiny was 2. But seeing that billionaire's pain, recognizing the same grief she carried, it had felt like Destiny, like Marcus, was guiding her hand. "Sometimes, baby, we have to be brave for people who forgot how to be brave for themselves." "Like how you're brave for me." The question shattered something inside Amara's chest. She wasn't brave. She was terrified every single day. Terrified of the bills, of losing their apartment, of watching her daughter's bright spirit fade under the weight of an illness that was stealing her childhood piece by piece. "Dr. Martinez wants to see us," she said instead, avoiding the question that cut too close to her own feelings of inadequacy. Dr. Elena Martinez met them in her office overlooking Lake Michigan, her kind eyes holding the practiced compassion of someone who delivered impossible news daily. "Destiny's latest scans show the tumor hasn't responded to the current treatment protocol. We need to discuss more aggressive options." The words hit Amara like physical blows. More aggressive meant more expensive. More experimental meant less insurance coverage. More anything meant resources she simply didn't have. "How much time do we have?" Amara's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. 6 months, maybe less, without intervention. But there's a clinical trial at Northwestern. "How much?" Dr. Martinez's pause said everything. 50,000 up front. But Amara, this could save. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. $50,000 might as well have been 50 million. Amara worked 3 jobs, the Pinnacle 3 nights a week, a coffee shop on weekends, cleaning offices before dawn, and still couldn't afford Destiny's current medications without assistance programs. Back in his office, Jonathan paced between his desk and windows, his usual control fracturing with each step. He'd built his empire on calculated risks and emotional distance, but that note had shattered his ability to compartmentalize. The waitress, Amara, had somehow connected his private grief to her public struggle, and the violation felt both intrusive and oddly healing. He pulled out his phone 3 times to call the Pinnacle, each time hanging up before dialing. What would he say? How could he explain that her desperate act had awakened something he'd buried with his daughter? That for the first time in 4 years, he'd felt something other than numbness? "Sir." Patricia's voice interrupted his spiral. There's a woman here to see you. No appointment. She says it's about a note. Jonathan's heart hammered against his ribs. Send her away. She brought her daughter, sir. A little girl who... Well, she looks quite ill. The world tilted sideways. Jonathan gripped his desk edge, knuckles white against the mahogany. I said send her away, Patricia. I don't know what game she's playing, but... Through his office's glass walls, he caught a glimpse of them in the reception area. Amara stood with quiet dignity despite her obvious nervousness, one protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. The little girl wore the same purple headband from the photograph, her thin frame swallowed by an oversized jacket. For a heartbeat, Jonathan saw Emma at that age, brave and bright even when the cancer was winning. The similarity wasn't just in their illness. It was in the way they both seemed to radiate hope despite everything trying to crush it. He turned away from the window, his jaw clenched with determination. Tell them to leave. Now. But even as he spoke the words, Jonathan knew he was lying to himself. That note hadn't just revealed Amara's desperation. It had exposed his own cowardice. For 4 years, he'd hidden behind guilt and money, funding cancer research from a distance while refusing to face the human cost of the disease that had stolen his daughter. Now that cost stood 30 feet away, wearing his daughter's brave smile and her mother's desperate courage. The intercom crackled again. Sir, they're leaving. The little girl asked me to give you this. Patricia appeared with another folded paper, this one written in careful child's handwriting. Jonathan's hands shook as he opened it. Thank you for making my mama brave. Your angel daughter must be proud. Destiny Johnson. The note fluttered to the floor as Jonathan sank into his leather chair, finally understanding that some battles couldn't be won through avoidance, and some connections couldn't be severed by fear. Outside, Chicago continued its relentless pulse, but inside his glass tower, a billionaire began to crumble under the weight of recognition he could no longer deny. The sterile corridors of Children's Memorial Hospital hummed with the quiet urgency that only pediatric wards possessed. Jonathan Rivers stood frozen outside room 304, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers, Emma's favorite. His tailored suit feeling absurdly out of place among the colorful murals of cartoon animals meant to bring cheer to impossible circumstances. He'd driven here at dawn, Amara's note burning in his memory. Your daughter Emma helped mine fight when they were roommates. Destiny asks about the princess every day. Room 304. Mr. Rivers. Amara's voice was barely above a whisper as she emerged from the room, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. She wore scrubs now instead of her server's uniform, her natural beauty undimmed despite the sleepless nights written in her eyes. You work here too. Jonathan's voice cracked with the weight of realization. Double shifts. The pinnacle pays for Destiny's medications, but hospital bills. She gestured helplessly at the overwhelming reality surrounding them. I didn't expect you to come. I just thought. Emma talked about you so much. How proud she was of her daddy who built the tallest buildings. The words hit Jonathan like physical blows. During Emma's final months, he'd been consumed with the Singapore merger, flying back and forth between continents, missing countless bedside moments while his daughter fought for each breath. She mentioned Destiny every day in her letters, he whispered, the memory of unopened envelopes still haunting him. I was too busy, too afraid to read them properly until after. I failed her. Amara's expression softened. You didn't fail anyone. Emma knew you loved her. She used to tell Destiny stories about her daddy who touched the clouds with his buildings. Said you were going to build a castle just for sick kids when she got better. The hospital sounds faded as Jonathan absorbed this revelation. Through the partially open door of room 304, he could see a small figure in the bed. Dark curls spread across a pillow covered in princess stickers. "The doctors say we have maybe 2 weeks to find a bone marrow match," Amara continued, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I've exhausted every avenue, called every registry. The Pinnacle insurance covers the basics, but the experimental treatment in Boston." She shrugged, unable to finish. "How much?" Jonathan's businessman instincts kicked in, though his heart was already writing the check. "It's not about money anymore," Amara said firmly. "It's about time, and hope, and believing that somewhere in this world, there's someone who can save her." A small voice called from inside the room. "Mama, is that the cloud building Daddy Emma told me about?" Amara looked at Jonathan with questioning eyes. Every instinct told him to run, to write a check and disappear back into his world of steel and glass where emotions couldn't touch him. But something in that child's voice, the same brave sweetness he remembered in Emma's final calls, rooted him to the spot. "Only if you want to meet him, baby girl," Amara called back. "Emma said he has magic hands that make buildings touch heaven." "I want to see." Jonathan's hands trembled as he followed Amara into the room. Destiny looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, but her eyes blazed with the same fierce spirit Emma had possessed. Tubes and monitors surrounded her like technological guardians, yet her smile could have powered the entire Chicago skyline. "You're even taller than Emma said," Destiny whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with wonder. "She said you were going to build us a castle when we got better. Is that still true?" Jonathan knelt beside her bed, his expensive suit forgotten. "What kind of castle would you like?" "One with a big room for all the sick kids, so nobody has to be scared alone. And a garden where Emma can visit sometimes." Destiny's innocent faith shattered the last of Jonathan's carefully constructed walls. Amara watched this exchange with growing amazement. The powerful CEO she'd served for months was melting before her eyes, replaced by a father discovering his daughter's legacy through another child's dreams. "Mr. Rivers," Dr. Martinez entered the room, tablet in hand. "I wasn't expecting to see you here. Are you family?" "He's Emma's daddy," Destiny announced proudly. "Emma was my princess sister." Dr. Martinez's expression softened with understanding. "Emma talked about you constantly. She was so proud of your work." He paused, studying Jonathan's face. "Actually, your timing is extraordinary. We've been trying to reach families about a new matching protocol. Emma's tissue samples are still in our registry, and we've discovered that children who shared rooms often develop similar antibody patterns. It's rare, but—" "You're saying Emma might be able to help Destiny?" Amara's voice was barely a breath. "I'm saying there's a possibility. We'd need to run extensive tests, but the connection these girls shared might be more than emotional. Sometimes, Mr. Rivers, the bonds children form in these walls transcend what we understand medically." Jonathan felt Emma's presence in that moment. Not the guilt-ridden ghost that had haunted him for years, but the loving daughter who had always believed her daddy could fix anything. Maybe she still could. "Whatever you need," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tests, treatments, specialists. Whatever it takes." "Mama," Destiny whispered, reaching for Amara's hand. "I think Emma sent him to us. Just like she promised she would." As machines beeped softly around them and Chicago morning light filtered through the hospital windows, 3 broken people found themselves bound together by the love of a little girl whose spirit refused to let go. The businessman and the waitress, separated by every social barrier imaginable, discovered they were about to become partners in the most important merger of their lives. The battle for Destiny's life was about to begin, and neither Jonathan nor Amara realized they were no longer fighting alone. What do you think happens when strangers become family through shared love? Drop your thoughts below. Sometimes the most unexpected connections create the strongest bonds. The fluorescent lights of Children's Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across Jonathan's face as he stood frozen in the oncology ward's family lounge, staring at a memorial wall he'd never noticed during Emma's treatments 4 years ago. Amara stood beside him, her uniform replaced by jeans and a worn cardigan, watching his face crumble as he read the small bronze plaques honoring young lives lost too soon. "Emma Catherine Rivers," he whispered, his finger tracing his daughter's name among the dozens of others. "She was 8 when she died. I wasn't here." Amara's breath caught. She'd suspected, but seeing the raw grief etched across his features made her own heart shatter. "The merger in Dubai," she said softly. "You chose business over." "Don't." His voice cracked like breaking glass. "Don't say what I already know. What I live with every fucking day." The hospital's evening quiet wrapped around them, broken only by distant beeping monitors and hushed conversations from grieving families. Jonathan sank into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, his billion-dollar empire meaning nothing in this place where money couldn't buy miracles. "She wrote me letters while I was gone," he continued, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. 17 letters in 3 weeks. "I saved them all, but I never read the last one. I couldn't. When I got back, she was already—" His words dissolved into silence. Amara knelt beside his chair, her professional boundaries obliterated by shared understanding. "Show me," she whispered. With trembling fingers, Jonathan opened his phone's photos, scrolling past corporate headshots and construction sites to find a folder labeled simply Emma. The first image made Amara gasp, a bald little girl with his gray eyes, grinning from a hospital bed while holding up a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures labeled Me and Daddy. "She drew that the day before I left for Dubai." Jonathan's voice barely registered above a whisper. "The doctors said she had 6 months. The merger was supposed to take 2 weeks. His laugh was bitter, hollow. 2 weeks became 3 when complications arose. Business complications that seemed so important then. "Jonathan," Amara started, but he held up his hand. "The night she died, my assistant called me in my Dubai hotel room. Do you know what I was doing? Celebrating. Champagne with the Al Rashid family because we'd finally closed the deal. $3 billion in my pocket while my daughter took her last breath asking for her daddy." The memorial wall seemed to pulse with silent accusation as Jonathan continued scrolling through photos. Emma at Christmas, bald but radiant in a red velvet dress. Emma in the hospital playroom, teaching other sick children to play chess. Emma, always Emma, fighting with a smile that could light up the darkest room. "The last letter," Amara said gently. "What did it say?" Jonathan's hands stilled on his phone. For a moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing. Then, with movements that seemed to cause him physical pain, he opened his email app and scrolled to a folder marked Emma's Letters. The subject line read, "For Daddy when he comes home." "I had her nurse email it to me after the funeral," he whispered. "I've carried it for 4 years but never. I couldn't." What would you do if you had one last message from someone you loved but were too afraid to read it? Share your thoughts below. Amara reached out, covering his phone with her gentle hand. "You don't have to read it alone," she said. "Not anymore." The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. In the harsh hospital lighting, two broken souls found themselves sharing the heaviest burden either had ever carried. "Why?" Jonathan asked suddenly, looking at her with desperate confusion. "Why did you give me that note? How did you know?" Amara stood slowly, walking to the memorial wall where her own secrets waited. Her finger traced a different name, Marcus Anthony Johnson, age 6, forever in our hearts. "My son," she whispered, and Jonathan felt the ground shift beneath him. Destiny's twin brother. He died 2 years ago, same cancer as Emma. I worked 3 jobs trying to save him, but... She pressed her palm against the cold bronze. "I was here when your daughter passed. I saw you in the hallway that day, saw the same brokenness I carried. You were here." Jonathan's voice was incredulous. "I was cleaning rooms on the night shift then, trying to pay Marcus's medical bills. I remember you standing outside her room, still in your travel clothes, holding that last letter. You looked like I felt, like the world had ended and somehow forgot to take us with it." The revelation hit Jonathan like a physical blow. "You've been watching me grieve for 4 years?" "Not watching," Amara corrected, turning to face him fully. "Recognizing. Every Tuesday at the Pinnacle, I'd see you carrying that same pain I know so well. Tonight, when I saw Emma's picture..." Her voice broke. "I couldn't let you suffer alone anymore. Not when I know exactly what that suffering feels like." Jonathan stared at her, seeing not the invisible waitress who'd served his lonely dinners, but a mother who'd walked the same hell he had. A woman who'd lost everything but still found the courage to reach across social lines to comfort a stranger's pain. "We both lost our children to the same disease," he said slowly, the connection crystallizing between them. "We both carry guilt we can't escape." "But we're still here," Amara replied, her voice gaining strength. "They're gone, but we're still here. That has to mean something." In the quiet of the memorial lounge, surrounded by the names of children who'd fought battles they couldn't win, 2 grieving parents found themselves no longer alone. The barriers of race, class, and circumstance dissolved in the face of shared loss and the terrible, beautiful understanding that only comes from surviving the unsurvivable. Jonathan looked down at his phone, Emma's final letter still unopened after 4 years of cowardice. "Will you?" He started, then stopped, vulnerability making his voice small. "Will you help me read it?" Amara nodded, settling beside him in the uncomfortable plastic chair. "Together," she promised. And in that moment, neither realized they were about to discover that sometimes the deepest love comes not from what we gain, but from what we're brave enough to share when we have nothing left to lose. The fluorescent lights of Children's Memorial cast everything in sterile white as Jonathan followed Amara through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and quiet hope. His $1,000 shoes squeaked against linoleum floors that had witnessed more miracles and heartbreak than any place had a right to hold. "She doesn't know about the medical bills," Amara whispered as they approached room 314. "I tell her the treatments are covered, that everything's fine. She's only 7. She shouldn't have to worry about money on top of everything else." Jonathan nodded, his throat tight. Through the small window, he could see a little girl with Amara's eyes and a bright pink headscarf, coloring intently in a book. The resemblance to Emma at that age hit him like a physical blow. "Mr. Rivers?" Amara's voice pulled him back. "You don't have to do this. I know it must be painful." "No." His voice was rougher than he intended. "I need to be here. Emma would want me to be here." Amara pushed open the door, and suddenly the clinical hospital atmosphere transformed. Destiny's corner of the room exploded with color. Drawings taped to walls, stuffed animals crowding the narrow bed, a hand-painted sign reading Destiny's Rainbow Kingdom hanging above the window. "Mama!" The little girl's face lit up like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "You're early. Did you bring me more crayons? I'm making a picture of our house, but with a garden this time and maybe a pool and—" Her words stopped as she noticed Jonathan standing hesitantly in the doorway. "Destiny, baby, this is Mr. Rivers. He's a friend of Mama's." Destiny studied Jonathan with the frank curiosity of childhood, unimpressed by his expensive suit or the nervous way he clutched the gift bag he'd hastily assembled from the hospital's gift shop. "You're really tall," she announced. "Are you a basketball player? Mama loves the Bulls, but I think basketball is loud. I like quiet games better, like coloring and puzzles." Jonathan found himself smiling despite the ache in his chest. "I like quiet games too. I brought you something." He offered the bag with hands that weren't quite steady. Destiny's eyes widened as she pulled out a deluxe art set. 120 colored pencils, sketch pads, and erasers shaped like tiny rainbows. "Mama, look. It's like having a whole rainbow in a box." "What do you say, baby?" "Thank you, Mr. Rivers. This is the most beautiful present ever." Destiny immediately began organizing the pencils by color, her small hands moving with careful precision. "Want to see my hospital pictures? I draw all the nice doctors and nurses. Mama says art helps healing happen faster." For the next hour, Jonathan found himself sitting cross-legged on the hospital floor, watching Destiny create worlds with her new pencils while Amara dozed fitfully in the bedside chair. The little girl chattered softly about her drawings. Castles where nobody got sick, gardens where flowers bloomed in December, families that stayed together forever. "Mr. Rivers?" Destiny's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you have kids?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Jonathan's first instinct was to deflect, to maintain the emotional distance that had protected him for 4 years. But looking into this brave little girl's eyes, he found himself answering truthfully. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Emma. She was about your age when she got sick like you." Destiny nodded solemnly, as if this information required careful consideration. "Did she like to draw too?" "She loved it. She used to draw pictures of us traveling to places we'd never been. Paris, Tokyo, the moon." His voice caught. "I still have them all." "That's good," Destiny said with 7-year-old wisdom. "Pictures help us remember the happy parts. Even when people go to heaven, the happy parts stay with us down here." Share in the comments. What's the most meaningful conversation you've ever had with a child? Amara stirred in her chair, watching this impossible scene unfold. The most powerful man in Chicago, sitting on a hospital floor, listening with complete attention as her daughter explained her theory that colors had feelings and certain combinations could make sick people feel better. "Purple is for brave," Destiny was saying, carefully shading a flower in her drawing. "Mama is purple. And yellow is for hope. That's what Nurse Patricia says. What color are you, Mr. Rivers?" Jonathan considered this seriously. "I think I used to be gray. But maybe I'm starting to be yellow too." As visiting hours wound down, Destiny grew sleepy from her medications. She handed Jonathan a drawing she'd quickly sketched. 2 figures standing in a garden, one tall and one small, surrounded by flowers in every color. "That's you and Emma," she explained softly. "In the place where flowers bloom forever. Mama says people we love never really leave us. They just grow gardens in our hearts instead." Jonathan's vision blurred as he accepted the precious gift. When was the last time anyone had given him something this meaningful? When was the last time he'd felt this connected? "Thank you," he whispered. "This is the most beautiful picture I've ever received." As they prepared to leave, Destiny caught Amara's hand. "Mama, Mr. Rivers feels like family, doesn't he? Like maybe God sent him to help us with the rainbow gardens." Outside in the hospital corridor, Jonathan and Amara walked in comfortable silence toward the elevators. The weight of shared understanding hung between them. Not romantic, but something deeper. Recognition. Purpose. The beginning of healing. "She's extraordinary," Jonathan said finally. "You've raised an incredible little girl." "She's taught me everything about courage," Amara replied. "Every day she wakes up and chooses joy, even when her body hurts. I learn from her more than she learns from me." At the elevator, Jonathan turned to face her. "Amara, I want to help. Not just with the medical bills, though those are handled as of tonight. I want to be part of this. Part of making sure Destiny gets every chance, every treatment, every rainbow pencil set she needs." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice was quiet but firm. "For 4 years I've been hiding from the world, thinking I didn't deserve happiness because I failed Emma when she needed me most. But tonight, watching Destiny draw gardens where people don't get sick, she reminded me that Emma would want me to help other little girls beat this disease. She'd want me to turn my grief into something beautiful." The elevator arrived with a soft ding, but neither moved to enter it. "There's something else," Jonathan continued. "I've been funding cancer research through my foundation for years, but from a distance. Writing checks felt like penance, but it never felt like healing. Tonight, for the first time since Emma died, I felt useful. Like maybe I could be part of something bigger than my own pain." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Rivers." "Jonathan. Please, call me Jonathan." "Jonathan," she said softly. "Thank you. Not just for the money, but for seeing her. Really seeing her. Most people look at sick children and see only the illness. You looked at Destiny and saw the artist, the philosopher, the little girl who believes in rainbow gardens." As they rode down to the parking garage, both felt the fragile beginning of something neither had expected to find. Not romance, but something equally precious. Hope. Partnership. The possibility that two people from completely different worlds might be exactly what the other needed to heal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more treatments, difficult conversations. But tonight, in the quiet space between one man's guilt and one mother's fierce love, healing had begun. The bond forming between them wasn't built on attraction or convenience. It was forged in the sacred space where grief meets hope, where broken hearts recognize each other and decide to beat in rhythm again. The 42nd floor conference room buzzed with tension as Jonathan's board of directors filed in for the emergency meeting. Through the wall of windows, Chicago's skyline stretched endlessly, but Jonathan barely noticed the view that once symbolized his conquests. His mind remained fixated on the medical facility plans spread across the mahogany table. Emma's Hope Children's Cancer Center, a $50 million project that would bear his daughter's name. "Jonathan, we need to discuss your recent decisions." Board Chairman Harold Whitman's voice cut through the morning air like ice. At 65, Harold had been Jonathan's mentor for 2 decades, but today his expression held only concern and barely concealed frustration. "My decisions are perfectly sound," Jonathan replied, straightening his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed since that Tuesday night 2 weeks ago when everything changed. Since Amara's note had torn open wounds he'd spent years trying to seal it. Your daughter would be proud of the father you're becoming." Those 7 words had shattered something fundamental inside him, and in the aftermath, Jonathan had made choices that defied every principle of ruthless business acumen he'd cultivated. The hostile takeover of 3 smaller development firms, canceled. The low-income housing demolition project on Chicago's South Side, scrapped. And now, the medical center that would consume profits his shareholders expected to see in their accounts. $50 million, Harold continued, his weathered hands gripping the architectural plans. For a children's hospital in a neighborhood that will never generate returns. Jonathan, I've watched you build this empire from nothing, but this isn't business, this is therapy. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Vice President Margaret Chen cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we could explore a smaller pilot program? Something more fiscally responsible. Fiscally responsible. Jonathan's voice rose, surprising everyone, including himself. We're sitting in a building worth $300 million, discussing whether $50 million to save children's lives is too much? CFO David Torres leaned forward, his expression grave. Jonathan, the Southside Clinic project, the scholarship fund, the employee benefit expansions. You've committed us to nearly $200 million in charitable expenditures this quarter alone. Our investors are asking questions we can't answer. Through the windows, Jonathan caught sight of the Willis Tower piercing the morning sky, and suddenly he was transported back to that night at the Pinnacle. Amara's trembling hands as she'd served his meal. The way her eyes had recognized his pain before he'd even known it existed. The courage it must have taken for a Southside waitress to reach across every social barrier and offer comfort to a man who could destroy her livelihood with a phone call. She saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed, Jonathan said quietly, almost to himself. Who? Harold demanded. Jonathan, who are you talking about? The conference room fell silent. Jonathan realized his mistake too late. He'd never told them about Amara, about the note, about the revelation that had turned his carefully ordered world upside down. How could he explain that a woman who served him steak had shown him more about his daughter's legacy than 4 years of grief counseling? There's someone, Jonathan began carefully. Someone who helped me understand what Emma would have wanted. What she would have expected from me. Harold's expression darkened. Please tell me you're not making business decisions based on pillow talk with some. Don't. Jonathan's voice carried a warning that made the older man step back. Don't finish that sentence. But the damage was done. Harold's implication hung in the air like poison gas, and Jonathan watched as understanding dawned on the faces around the table. They thought this was about a woman. They thought his sudden philanthropy, his radical business decisions, were all about impressing someone. They were right in a way, but not how they imagined. Margaret Chen spoke carefully. Jonathan, perhaps you should take some time off. Let us handle the day-to-day operations while you sort through whatever personal matters are influencing these choices. Personal matters? Jonathan stood abruptly, his chair rolling back against the floor-to-ceiling windows. My daughter died because I was too busy making money to be there when she needed me. I missed her last words because I was in a Dubai conference room, negotiating a deal that added another 0 to our quarterly profits. And now, when I finally try to do something that would make her proud, you want to discuss fiscal responsibility. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. David Torres shuffled papers nervously. Jonathan, we all understand your loss, but... No, you don't. Jonathan's hands pressed against the cool glass, Chicago sprawling beneath him like a chessboard where he'd once moved pieces without considering the human cost. None of you understand. You see a grieving father making poor business decisions. What you don't see is a man who finally learned the difference between being successful and being worthy of his daughter's memory. Harold stood slowly, his mentor's mask slipping to reveal the calculating businessman beneath. Then perhaps it's time we discussed a temporary leave of absence. Until you can separate personal grief from corporate responsibility. The words hit Jonathan like physical blows. A leave of absence. They were staging a coup, wrapped in concern and presented as help. Everything he'd built, every achievement that had once defined him, was being stripped away because he dared to care about something more than profit margins. "You want me gone," Jonathan said quietly, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "We want you well," Margaret replied diplomatically. "These projects can wait. The company needs steady leadership, and right now. Right now, I'm finally becoming the man my daughter needed me to be." Jonathan turned from the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "But you're right about one thing. This company and what I've become, they can't coexist." Harold's eyebrows rose. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you win." Jonathan walked slowly around the conference table, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The Southside Clinic, Emma's Hope, the scholarship fund, scrap it all. Go back to making money and forgetting that children die while we debate quarterly projections. He paused at the door, his hand on the polished steel handle. "But when you do, remember that Emma Rivers, my daughter, your former CEO's child, died believing her father was a hero. And for 2 weeks, thanks to someone brave enough to see past this suit and corner office, I almost believed it too." The door closed behind him with finality that echoed through the conference room like a gunshot. Harold Whitman stared at the architectural plans for Emma's Hope, and for just a moment, wondered if they'd just made the biggest mistake in the company's history. Jonathan walked through the executive offices he'd designed and conquered, past the secretary who'd managed his calendar for 8 years, beyond the elevator that had carried him to countless victories. But all he could think about was Amara, the woman whose 7 words had cost him everything he'd once thought mattered, and somehow made him feel more alive than he had in years. By evening, news of Jonathan Rivers' resignation would ripple through Chicago's financial district like an earthquake. The king of Chicago development had abdicated his throne, and nobody understood why. Nobody except a waitress on the South Side, who would soon learn that sometimes reaching out to save someone else means watching your own world crumble in the process. The silence in Jonathan's penthouse felt different now. Not the comfortable isolation he'd cultivated for years, but a hollow ache that pressed against his chest with each breath. For 72 hours, he'd replayed every word of their devastating confrontation at Children's Memorial, every accusation Amara had hurled at him before walking away forever. "You think your money makes you Emma's father? You think writing checks erases 4 years of running away?" Her words echoed through his marble hallways as he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom he no longer wanted to rule. On his desk, Emma's medical file lay open beside the foundation paperwork his lawyers had prepared. The Emma Rivers Pediatric Cancer Foundation, designed to fund treatments for families like Amara's. But what good were grand gestures when he destroyed the one connection that had made him feel human again? His phone buzzed with the 5th call from his board of directors. The Rivers development deal with the Osaka investors was hanging in the balance, requiring his immediate attention. A year ago, he would have flown to Japan without hesitation. Now, the thought of another boardroom felt like suffocation. Jonathan picked up Emma's photograph from his desk, tracing her smile with trembling fingers. "I don't know how to do this, sweetheart," he whispered to the empty room. "I don't know how to be the man she saw in me." Across the city, Amara sat in the Children's Memorial Hospital waiting room, Destiny's small hand warm in hers as they waited for Dr. Martinez to deliver the latest test results. The familiar antiseptic smell and hushed conversations transported her back to those terrible days when her own hope had hung by threads thinner than spider silk. "Mama, why are you crying?" Destiny asked, her voice small but steady despite the four-port visible beneath her sleeve. "I'm not crying, baby girl. Just tired." Amara wiped her eyes quickly, but the tears wouldn't stop. 3 days of replaying her explosion at Jonathan had left her raw, questioning everything she'd believed about pride and protection. "You abandoned your daughter when she needed you most. At least I stayed." The cruelty of her own words haunted her. She'd seen the devastation in his eyes, watched years of careful composure crumble under the weight of truth he'd been running from. In her anger and pain, she'd weaponized his greatest failure, thrown his grief back at him like stones. But beneath her fury had been something else, disappointment so sharp it cut deeper than any betrayal. For those precious weeks, she'd begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who understood. Someone who saw her not as a charity case or a sob story, but as a woman worthy of love. "Mrs. Johnson." Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Could we speak privately about Destiny's results?" Amara's heart clenched. She'd faced this moment alone so many times, the careful doctor's voice, the measured words that could mean hope or devastation. This time felt different, though. This time, the absence of someone beside her felt like a physical wound. "It's okay, baby. I'll be right back." She kissed Destiny's forehead and followed the doctor into the corridor. "The new treatment protocol is showing remarkable progress," Dr. Martinez said gently. "Her numbers are the best we've seen in months. But I need to discuss the financial aspect." Amara braced herself for the familiar conversation about payment plans and charity applications, but Dr. Martinez continued with something unexpected in her voice. "An anonymous donor has established a fund specifically for pediatric cancer patients. The entire cost of Destiny's treatment, current and future, has been covered. The paperwork mentions it's in honor of a girl named Emma Rivers." The corridor seemed to tilt around Amara as understanding crashed over her like a wave. Through her anger, through their bitter words, through everything, he'd still kept his promise to help her daughter. Back in his penthouse, Jonathan stood over a letter he'd written and rewritten 17 times. His hands shook as he read the final version. Amara, you were right about everything. I did run when Emma needed me most. I chose a boardroom in Dubai over my daughter's bedside because I was a coward who couldn't face losing her. I've been running ever since. But you showed me something I'd forgotten. That love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when you're broken. Especially then. I can't undo my failures as Emma's father. But maybe I can honor her memory by helping other children fight the battle she couldn't win. The foundation is real, and it starts with Destiny. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that meeting you, knowing you, changed everything. You gave me back my daughter's voice, and for that, I will be grateful until my last breath. Take care of that beautiful girl of yours. Tell her she has a guardian angel named Emma who thinks she's the bravest person in the world. All my love. Jonathan *. He sealed the letter with hands that hadn't stopped trembling since their confrontation. Outside, Chicago's lights blurred through tears he'd been holding back for 4 years. The choice before him was simple and terrifying: remain safely isolated in his tower of grief and guilt, or risk everything on the slim possibility that love, real, messy, imperfect love, might still be waiting for him in the warm brown eyes of a waitress who'd seen straight through to his soul. Jonathan picked up his phone and dialed the number he'd memorized but never had the courage to call. "Amara. It's Jonathan. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I have something that belongs to you. Your courage. You left it with me that night at the Pinnacle, and I think it might be time I gave it back." The silence on the other end stretched like eternity, filled with the weight of everything broken and everything that might still be saved. "I'm at Children's Memorial," her voice came finally, thick with tears. "Room 314. Destiny's asking about the nice man who bought her the teddy bear." Jonathan closed his eyes, Emma's photograph pressed against his heart. "I'll be right there." As he grabbed his coat and headed for the door, abandoning the Osaka deal and every safety net he'd ever built, Jonathan Rivers finally understood what his daughter had been trying to teach him all along. Sometimes the greatest courage comes from admitting you need someone else to help carry the weight of love. The choice was made. Now came the terrifying, beautiful work of becoming the man worthy of it. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly opened Emma Rivers Pediatric Wing, casting rainbow patterns across walls painted with murals of soaring eagles and blooming gardens. Jonathan Rivers stood in the main corridor, no longer the isolated billionaire who once dined alone every Tuesday, but a man transformed by purpose and unexpected love. "The dedication ceremony starts in 20 minutes, Amara said softly, adjusting the small microphone clipped to his navy suit lapel. Her own transformation was equally striking. No longer the invisible waitress in the Pinnacle shadows, she now carried herself with quiet confidence as Director of Family Support Services, her natural beauty radiant in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her warm brown skin. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her fingers lingering on his collar longer than necessary, a gesture that had become natural over these months of rebuilding their lives together. Jonathan covered her hand with his own, marveling at how this simple touch still sent warmth through him. "Not anymore. Not with you here." Through the windows, they could see the crowd gathering in the hospital's memorial garden. Families whose children had been touched by the wing's revolutionary treatment programs, medical staff, city officials, and reporters from across the Midwest. But Jonathan's attention was drawn to a smaller group near the new playground. Destiny Johnson, now in full remission, laughing as she pushed another young patient on the swings, her infectious joy a living testament to the miracles that had bloomed from that terrifying Tuesday night 6 months ago. "She looks so strong," Jonathan murmured, watching the 8-year-old who had become like a daughter to him. "She is strong. Just like her mother." His voice carried the depth of a man who had learned to see beyond surface differences to the courage that lay beneath. Amara smiled, remembering the journey that had brought them here. After that night when she'd collapsed in the Pinnacle's parking lot, when Jonathan had held her as she sobbed about Destiny's worsening condition and the impossible medical bills, everything had changed. Not just the money, though his immediate payment of all Destiny's medical expenses had been life-saving, but the way two broken souls had recognized their shared need for healing. What do you think transforms us more, success or the courage to be vulnerable with someone who truly sees us? Share your thoughts below. Mr. Rivers? Ms. Johnson? Dr. Patricia Chen, the Wing's chief pediatric oncologist, approached with clipboard in hand. "The mayor's ready to begin whenever you are." Jonathan nodded, then turned to face the wall where Emma's photograph hung in a place of honor. Not the hospital bed image he'd carried in guilt for years, but a vibrant picture of her at age 7, arms outstretched as if embracing the world. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "In memory of Emma Rivers and in honor of all children who fight with courage beyond their years." "I used to think coming here would make the pain worse," he admitted to Amara. "But seeing these children fight the way Emma fought, It makes me feel closer to her, not further away." Amara squeezed his hand. "She would be so proud of what you've built here. What we've built." The ceremony itself became a blur of speeches and ribbon cuttings, but the moment that mattered most came when Jonathan approached the podium. The crowd quieted, and for a heartbeat, he was transported back to that Tuesday evening when a simple note, "Your daughter would be proud," had shattered his world and rebuilt it. "6 months ago," he began, his voice carrying across the garden, "I was a man who had everything money could buy but had lost everything that truly mattered. I ate dinner alone every Tuesday at the same restaurant, carrying grief like a burden I deserved to bear forever." His eyes found Amara in the crowd, her face glowing with pride and love. Then a waitress, a single mother fighting her own impossible battles, had the courage to see past our differences and reach across a divide that seemed unbridgeable. She reminded me that grief shared is grief divided, and hope shared is hope multiplied. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. The Emma Rivers Pediatric Wing isn't just a memorial to my daughter. It's a testament to what happens when we have the courage to see each other's humanity. Every child who receives treatment here, every family who finds support, every miracle that unfolds within these walls, it all began with 7 words on a piece of paper from a woman who refused to let suffering remain invisible. As applause thundered across the garden, Jonathan stepped away from the podium and walked directly to Amara, taking her hands in front of hundreds of witnesses. "You gave me back my daughter's memory without the guilt," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into purpose. And somewhere along the way, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to love again." Tears streamed down Amara's face as he dropped to one knee, producing a ring that caught the morning sunlight like captured fire. "Amara Johnson, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love really can transcend every boundary?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd erupted in cheers, but all Jonathan could hear was Destiny's voice calling out, "Mom! Mr. Jonathan! I love you both so much." Later that evening, after the ceremonies and interviews and congratulations had faded, the 3 of them sat together in their new home, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan that had been transformed from a cold bachelor pad into a warm family sanctuary. Destiny was curled between them on the couch, finally asleep after an exhausting but joyful day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been brave enough to write that note?" Amara asked softly, her engagement ring catching the light from the fireplace. Jonathan considered this, thinking of all the Tuesdays he might have continued to spend alone, all the children who might not have received life-saving treatment, all the love that might have remained locked away behind walls of grief and class divisions. "I think the universe has a way of bringing together the people who need each other most," he said finally. "But I'm grateful every day that you were brave enough to trust that instinct." Outside their windows, Chicago sparkled in the darkness, a city full of invisible connections waiting to be discovered. And in Children's Memorial Hospital, the Emma Rivers Pediatric Wing stood as a beacon of hope, proof that love, unexpected, transformative, boundless, could indeed conquer every obstacle. As Amara nestled closer to him, Jonathan smiled, knowing that somewhere Emma was smiling too. The little girl who had fought so bravely was living on through every life saved in her name, through the family that had formed around her memory, and through the love that had grown from the ashes of grief into something beautiful and eternal. The note that had once paralyzed him with its simple truth had become the foundation of a new life built on courage, compassion, and the radical belief that love, in all its unexpected forms, was always worth the risk. In the end, what matters most? the love we've lost or the love we choose to build from that loss? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for sticking with this story till the very end. But trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. The next story is crazier, more shocking, and will blow your mind. Click the image on your screen now and dive right in. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single twist.